Well, hey there. You've stumbled upon the intersection of internet quandaries and psychological insight. Welcome to Veritas Views on AITA, where the quirks of the internet meet the expertise of Veritas Psychology Partners.
Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Michael McBride, and I'm joined by our dynamic duo.
Hi, I'm Dr. Gayle MacBride, and I am joined by a psychologist whose wit is only matched by his intellect, Dr. Dan Kessler.
And thank you, Gail. As always, this is not necessarily a compliment. The fact that they match isn't necessarily a good thing, but in this case, I'm going to follow John and Julie Gottman's advice and assume positive intent and say thank you so much for that, Dr. McBride. And I look forward to your thoughtful insights as we tackle this next conundrum. Michael, what do you got for us?
Well, first of all, welcome both of you. And for the newbies out there, if they don't know what Am I the Asshole is, in short, it's when someone posts a scenario and asks readers, who's the asshole here? And that's what we're going to help determine. Neither Dan nor Gail have seen this or read it before, so let's go. Today's prompt begins with a relatively simple headline, which is, am I the asshole for refusing to let my brother-in-law sell art at my boutique? And the story goes...
How is that a simple headline?
That's
immediately complex.
Yeah, immediately I'm like going, wow, like I think, well, what's the relationship between them two? What's the nature of the art? What's the nature of the boutique? They match up. I mean, there's so many questions already. So I'm going to agree with Gail and disagree with Michael on this and say this is not a simple question. But you probably should tell the story now. Yeah,
might be helpful.
Yeah,
would be fair enough. I take out the simple and I'll just tell the story, which is, I, 26-year-old female, own a small boutique clothing store downtown. My brother-in-law Henry is an amateur artist trying to get exposure. He asked if he could sell his paintings in my store on consignment to reach new customers. The issue is that Henry's art is kind of dark and not the aesthetic I want for my boutique. I tried to gently explain that his style doesn't just fit with the bright, lively vibe of my store. Henry got upset and accused me of undermining his dreams as an artist just because we have different tastes. My husband thinks I am being unfair and could help launch his brother's career. But as the boutique owner, I don't think I should have to compromise my curated vision to display art I simply don't care for. Am I the asshole? I want to support Henry's hobby, but don't think my store is the right venue for his art.
Wow. So many things here. And I'm sure we're not going to get the level of detail that you or I would prefer to have to really counsel someone through if this came into our office from a client.
Right.
But that said, wow. So this individual is 26 and the artist in question is her brother-in-law. Just remind me.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
That's correct. I'm sorry. Yep.
Okay. All right. So the brother-in-law has a very different aesthetic. And, right off the bat, I think if I were to take this on with a client, I would be looking for actually a skill that I really value and use quite often, which is the power of and. If you've followed me anywhere or you've talked to me in therapy or any of these opportunities to interact with me, you'll hear me talk about and instead of but. And is additive to the conversation, but is literally subtractive. If we go back to elementary school math, and this really, actually, the reason this hit me, I'm going to do a little bit of a diversion here, is I remember when I was in a supervisory role, and I had a really long commute. And so I would listen to books on tape I just aged myself. Oops. So I was listening to audio books on my way to this job I had. And one of the books I listened to was Bossy Pants by Tina Fey. And this is where I learned that in improv comedy, they use that yes and technique. And she really did a great job in the book of talking about what that meant and how important it was. And she ran through some kind of humorous examples because, Tina Fey. And I really walked away from listening to that chapter of the book with such an understanding of how and can really move a conversation forward. And I think that this young person, coming back to the topic at hand, has thrown a butt in here. I support his hobby, but I'm not going to do it through my store. And she has closed off any opportunities to be a supportive family member. This situation could use an and.
Yeah.
I really would prefer not to hang it in my boutique, because it really doesn't fit with the vibe. And maybe we could hold a special event on a day or a time that we're not open, that we could, really feature you as an artist, or, something. There could be a compromise here, just sort of for the family goodwill. I do hear maybe a little bit of her devaluing her brother-in-law's work, because at the end she calls it a hobby.
I'm waiting for a chance
Not
to
a
jump in on
pursuit.
this.
So like, I think
Yeah,
she's
yeah, yeah,
butting on this because
yeah.
she is diminishing what he is trying to do. And I don't think she's meaning to do it, but word
No,
choice is powerful. So
I
I'm going to
think
pause and let you actually
no, no,
react.
no, no, no. That's exactly where I like on one hand, first off, like it's your gig, it's your store.
Mhm.
You do you, and I don't think we get to tell people, like, if you've got a vision for a store and it's a business, that's great. And
Yeah.
I did chafe a little bit when I saw that word. I heard that word hobby,
Yeah.
because for an artist, it's not a hobby. It's who and what they are, and to call their art, whether it's paintings or writing novels, to call that a hobby is I think denigrating to what they're doing, and really devaluing. Maybe not denigrating, but certainly devaluing.
Unless the individual has called it a hobby.
Sure,
Then I
sure.
think it's fair to classify it as the
Yeah,
artist or writer or whomever is
but,
classifying it. But to go out there and to call
but
it a
the
hobby in this case does not seem fair.
yeah. No, it doesn't, because the original poster said this, that specifically that this individual was looking to build a career as an artist.
Yeah.
So there's that. And at the same time, like, I'm pretty much in her camp straight down the line. I mean, you very carefully curate things, and I like that word a lot. When you're developing a store, when you're developing a business, when you're developing, no matter what it is, you want to have a certain, for lack of a better word, a certain vibe. People have a certain feeling when they walk into the place. And if the art is very dark, and I think there's a great, there's a place for all types of art. Yeah, art should deeply touch you on some level or another. um and if the vibe of the store is a positive, upbeat vibe, and there's this art that is going to create an intense emotion, that's a painful emotion, that may be wonderful art, but not for this space.
I
And I threw in the
totally,
butt there,
totally agree.
but I threw in the butt there, and maybe I shouldn't have. I
No, I
I'm
think
not
it's
as
fair to subtract
I'm
it
not
from
as
the space,
objective
the
to this.
vibe.
Yeah, yeah. It just doesn't work in this space on the daily. I love your suggestion of holding a special event for it, or something else that allows her to support someone she cares about.
Right. I mean, if she is running a boutique in a particular area, she's probably a member of a chamber of commerce or a business group or something where she could maybe even create connections for this brother-in-law. I think they're thinking about this very narrowly and seeing only one possible solution as the right answer. And if you don't agree with me on this answer, then I'm going to be very rigid about this. And that's where I think a lot of family conflict comes in, is where we don't narrow in. I love, you referred to the Gottmans earlier. I love when they navigate conflict, they're talking about each partner, trying to define as narrowly as possible their area of inflexibility, and everything else
Right,
is flexible and negotiable. What is
right,
my dream here? And then how can we work on achieving this dream together? And without that, if those areas of inflexibility are too large, then problems become unsolvable.
right. In an earlier career point, I did mediation,
Yeah,
and the term in mediation is moving people from positions to interests.
yeah,
Each person here has a position. The shop owner wanted to have a positive, upbeat vibe for her shop. The brother-in-law, Henry, wanted to create art and sell his art, and those are their interests. Their positions are, um, I don't want it in my shop. You should put it in your shop. And if we can move away from those narrowly defined, as you said it, positions, and move to
yeah.
the interest, how can you help? How can I help him to sell his art? How can I help you to keep your shop in the place you want to be? And how do you, so now we're open up to all sorts of possibilities.
Yeah. And that's
I love what you said about that. And I think that this is a great opportunity if they can move away from their hurt feelings, which is really, I mean, you've had this too. You've got someone that's got hurt feelings and they're stuck.
Yes. Well, right. The phrase is hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
So I think absolutely.
So then my task, like if I'm working with either one of these folks, is let's move away from the hurt feelings or find a way away from the hurt feelings and try to get what the other person really wants and needs from you. And how do I help them to meet their needs while not compromising my values on this, rather than should I hang the art up on the wall?
Right. To say nothing of, then what exactly is this business that she is running? How, as a 26-year-old, has she found herself in this place? And lots of times what's happening with these young entrepreneurs, there we go. They are actually working with a larger organization and sort of franchising the store, which they have ownership of, and yet they are still required to report sales and those kinds of things. So while they have a great deal of autonomy, on the back end less so, and it can look like they're quite independent because of that franchising opportunity, but maybe not as much flexibility there. And it may be right, like we don't have enough details to suggest this, but I've certainly worked with clients who have been in this position and then find themselves, deeply caring about the store and their employees and doing good sales work and that kind of thing, but also caught in those crosshairs of a larger corporation that they do have to answer to.
Yeah, and the fail rate for new businesses is pretty high. And I'm thinking about this coffee shop I once used to love to go to, and they had rotating art that went through the coffee shop, and it was always for sale on the wall. And the vibe of the shop definitely changed when the vibe of the artwork changed.
Yeah. I was having a similar reaction because we've all been in that coffee shop that consigns art. It seems to be a pretty kind of standard thing. And you're right, it does change the vibe and the mood.
It does. So I'm like, I don't think anyone here is particularly well. All right, let me back up here. The original poster, I'm fine with. I'm fine with her decision. I think she could have navigated it a bit cleaner, with your and instead of but.
Yeah.
Not real happy about her brother-in-law or her partner being angry at her for this. I think that there's a better way of having handled that for them. I'm more annoyed with them for getting annoyed with her than I am annoyed with her for managing it, perhaps not optimally. Because the bottom line is
a bit more of a slider on some of these, right? It's not quite clean in some of these cases about whether or not someone's at fault in some way, shape, or form. But I see fault in both of them. I like what you were talking about, positions versus interests. They really are, they're stuck in that.
So this is a brainstorming session. This is a sitting down and like, how do I help you with your business and at the same time help develop this art on the side? How do I help you? How does each of them, how does the family come together to build both of these folks up in a way that's going to work and not harm the other? Because I could definitely see it being a problematic. If I walk into let's say it is a coffee shop, and I walk into this coffee shop and there's this like dark, heavy vibe in the room, and I kind of want to go there and enjoy my cup of coffee and read my book and do a little work and feel some enjoyment in the moment. It may get in the way. Maybe I'm being overly persnickety, but
no, I think, the psychology of sales is really relevant here. We haven't talked a whole lot about it, but there is a whole field of psychology that focuses on what helps sell an item or not, and it is delicate and precise, and we don't realize how much we're being sold to And I think that vibe really does matter. It ranges from, what color is my brand? What shapes appear on my label? What is the lighting in the store? The temperature? I mean, all of these things actually matter to consumerism. And at the end of the day, this young person is running a boutique. Sales are going to matter. This is her livelihood. And whether or not she is studying all of the psychology behind it, she seems to maybe have an intuition for it, as many of us do. We read this information and we go, oh, that's not terribly surprising. I mean, sometimes we're a little bit surprised, but lots of others, like shapes. Who would have thought circles sell to women? Like that's a thing.
Circles sell to women?
Yeah, apparently that's why they put circles on the Tide product, because women were more likely to buy it if a product had circles on it. So their logo is a circle. I mean, psychology at work, in our advertising, in our products, and selling, and it matters. So again, whether or not she can articulate these things, she does have a clear sense of it. And again, because she's probably been a consumer for 26 years, or plus or minus a few in there, and she knows what, she feels comfortable, environment wise in terms of purchasing, and she's trying to replicate that for her store. And I think the brother-in-law's art, if it doesn't match that vibe, it can really undermine that. And again, she may not be able to articulate it other than it's changing the vibe and it doesn't fit. And that's a lot of what I think folks can say without pointing to the research, but I think the research would support that.
Yeah, and I'm going to dive even deeper on this and forget about any reasoning she's got for a moment. This is her store. This is her gig.
Yeah.
The reality is she can say no for any reason or no reason at all.
Yes.
And I think we often get caught up in feeling the need to provide someone with a reason or a rationale, which then gives the other person the opportunity to decide or argue with us as to whether our reason or our rationale is good enough.
We've
Her
talked
reasoning
about this before. I love that. Yeah. Thanks
her
for bringing
reasoning could be, I don't fucking want it there. Like, I don't like the art. I don't want it for no reason other than that. Now, would that be the kindest thing? Maybe not. But I would also support that she doesn't have to have a quote unquote good reason. She could just not want the art there and find some other way of supporting him. So I'm going to, scroll all the way back and say maybe even the underlying question of whether this is a good reason or not a good reason shouldn't be there at all.
I like that. That's really interesting. And we do talk about that often with our clients is you can have your reasons. You don't have to disclose them. And maybe in some cases, you're ill-advised to disclose them, because then people find this as an opportunity to create a high conflict conversation. And when you find yourself in that situation, you're better off sharing less information rather than more, sticking to some maybe accurate information, but it's limited. And doing so in a friendly to neutral way, and then backing out. So, I'm sorry, that doesn't work for me. Well, maybe not even I'm sorry. In high conflict conversations, a lot of times you don't even want that in there, because it suggests some ownership. But social apologies are okay. But you have the right to just say no and not have to provide a whole lot. I think our best advice, though, to our clients is to be able to do that with kindness and firmness.
Right. And I generally, when I'm talking to someone who is in a potentially high conflict situation, especially with family, I often discourage providing reasons.
Yeah.
Same. You have absolutely no reason to have to give a reason. Can you drive me to the airport? No, that won't work for me. Why not? Because that won't work. Because every time you give a reason, you give the other person the opportunity to argue back, to debate with you, to tell you why your reason isn't valid. And if you give that more vague, that's just not going to work for me. The other person is left with, well, why not? Because it's not going to work for me. And they're kind of stuck there, and the conflict kind of goes away. They may be annoyed by you, but the debate over whether your reason is good enough kind of goes away. I might have, if this person were in my office, I might have said to her, you can just say no. You don't have to give a reason, and it may be better if you don't, because then they're going to argue back or have a debate, and you just don't want to do it. And that's fine. It is fine to just say, I don't want to do it.
Right. And I think I would have had almost an identical conversation and encouraged them with that. And okay, this guy is your brother-in-law to maintain some family relationships. It's important to your husband that you support his brother in some way, that the family support the brother in some way. Let's look at what maybe those opportunities could be for this individual, as opposed, not in your store, right? No,
Right.
this isn't going to work for me. I'd love to support you in some way. How
Right.
about I reach out
Right.
to some other local businesses where you might be a really good fit?
Exactly. Exactly. I am happy to help where I can.
Right.
Um, let's talk about how I can help you is
Or
is
I have,
wonderful.
yes, or I have experience in some of the marketing that you may need. Let me help you
Yeah,
market yourself a little bit more. I can jump in and do these other things
absolutely.
and no to the original request.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that a lot. We don't need to provide that. So that's the terrific. So all right. So we should get to the
Okay.
question, shouldn't we?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so your ultimate ruling, I mean, it sounds squarely um not the asshole for both of you. Is that correct, Dr. Kessler?
Yeah, I no, she's not an asshole for saying no here. I think the family member, I think she could have handled it slightly more artfully than she did. Artfully, get it? Um, and I think the family, again, I'm not quite willing to call them assholes, but I don't think the family is being terribly understanding of her. Both her partner and her brother-in-law are not really being understanding of what's going on for her. So I I would like her to handle it a bit better, but I'm more annoyed with the other folks in this question.
And
I'm
Dr. MacBride?
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball because as I was listening to my esteemed colleague, I had a thought, which is we really didn't discuss the role of the spouse here. So I agree. I don't think the original poster is an asshole. I am
Mm.
annoyed at the brother-in-law. I think getting too wrapped in exactly how he wanted this to play out. He's really acting on his level of disappointment and maybe discouragement in terms of his art career. So I think that is a little too overblown. Again, I don't know that I'd call him an asshole. I want more of a slider here, but it is certainly on the continuum of not the asshole to asshole. He's certainly, crossed the middle line a little bit.
All
But
right.
I am annoyed at the spouse here more than we've really spent time talking about because, being a spouse or a partner is a little bit of an art. Even when you think your partner is wrong, you've got to be careful not to call them out in really public ways. They need to feel like that you have their back
Mm-hmm.
almost unconditionally. Even if you
Mm-hmm.
disagree, finding a way to join with them and maintain that partnership is important. And maybe discuss again those nuances of where you disagree. I would love to have seen the
Mm-hmm.
spouse say, honey, you absolutely have the right to not hang anything you don't want to in the store. And I really want to find a way to support my brother in his art. How can we do that together rather than push her into something that she's not comfortable with? I'm annoyed and I
I
find it a bit more on the other side of that asshole slider.
I like that a lot actually, and I feel kind of bad that we kind of gave this guy a pass a bit in our discussion earlier. Like
Right?
we didn't like he needs some chops busting here because this is
He
a
does.
guy who he's married. His wife is starting something up here. She's a young entrepreneur, and you start a business up. There's a lot of emotion tied in it. There's a lot of hard work and effort, and for him to hit her with this, like I could see I'm more forgiving of Henry for getting like wrapped up in his art than I
Yeah.
am for the husband and not being like, I love your that he should be like, is there something we can do? But yeah, I'm totally on your side.
Right.
Like
That
I
answer
think
should never be, babe, you're wrong. Like that just feels
yeah,
especially when you've got a female entrepreneur and
yes.
two men telling her how she should run her business. I'm
Oh, we
sorry,
didn't
but
even
my
get it.
feminism hackles are kind of up.
We didn't even get into the gender stuff here. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I mean, if there is an asshole here, it's more the husband
Yeah.
than anyone else because I'm more forgiving of Henry. Although he's still, I agree with you. He crosses the 50-yard line as it were.
Yeah.
Husband is further along, and I'm totally fine with. I'm just about totally fine with her. Like I said, she gets like an A minus on this one. Like she could have handled it slightly better,
Yeah.
but I'm pretty annoyed with the husband as we talk about it. I'm annoyed with myself, right, for not like spending enough time giving him kind of shit about this.
we'll give ourselves a little bit of a pass because we do these things cold, and we're processing and thinking about these different elements. But this is what it looks like in an actual therapy session sometimes with a client, where you hear the information and you're talking it through and you're pulling apart these nuances, and then all of a sudden it hits and there's clarity for you in a way that then you can reflect to your client and maybe counsel them through. So yeah, sometimes we don't arrive at this stuff quite as quickly as we like, but we get there.
Hopefully it hits during the session. Every once in a while, I'm sure
man.
after the session, you're like, ooh, I missed out. I missed something.
Right. Yeah.
I missed something. And sometimes you figure that out in peer supervision. Sometimes you figure that out in your conversations in your own head afterwards, your thoughts about it in your own heads. But I'm glad you brought that up, because we really missed out on looking at that husband and going, man, you really missed an opportunity to support your wife here. Absolutely. Yeah.
So the internet was far harsher than either of you. And
really?
I know, like, the internet, has this reputation for being kind and cuddly, but
right.
They first of all, it was decisively not the asshole for the shop owner. Absolutely.
Right.
For many of the same reasons that you said, that, she worked hard to create this small business. Small businesses fail every day. And one of the things that they addressed as being a problem was trying to do too much. A small business needs to have a vision and a focus, and it sounds like she has that and knows what it is. And if she betrays that, she's going to struggle. But they also pointed out that the brother-in-law is not going to be served by being exposed to an audience that doesn't fit that. Why put his art in this place where it doesn't? I know. I thought that was a really interesting comment that one of the commenters made.
Thank you.
But then several of them jumped on the idea of both the brother-in-law and the spouse being parasites, was the language they used, trying to latch on and suck the life out of, and it went in really dark places. So, but I mean, I think
it's strong.
I'm not willing to be that strong. I don't. Yeah, no. I'm not willing to be so strong as to say they're being parasitic here. I think they're trying to do something positive without and being more thoughtless than parasitic. So
I like that, thoughtless, right? They're seeing something that's successful and they're trying to glom onto it, but I don't think they're trying to suck the life out of it. I think they're trying to breathe life into something else, and that's different.
There were also several people who commented on the brother-in-law as an artist needs to be less sensitive to no. That he's going to know that art is subjective, right? And you guys said this also, like, the shopkeeper has a view on his art that doesn't fit, and it is not going to fit in everybody's home. It's not going to fit in every coffee shop, as you mentioned. So he needs to be more accepting of no, and work to find that audience a little better where people are interested in his art.
I totally. No, go ahead.
I want to tell a story, but I keep a moment. It was a great story about being an artist and hearing no. All right, now I've said enough. I'm going to tell the story. I was years and years ago, and actually I don't even know if these people remember having the conversation while I was present, but we were at a large family gathering, and I had the opportunity to go for a run with a couple of folks in my family that work in artistic modes and really put themselves out there and have to audition for roles and those kinds of things. And as these individuals were talking about how they have to put themselves out there on the routine, how strong they have to be with their own egos to hear no repeatedly, because they're going to hear more no's than they hear yeses. And so, Michael, as you talk about being rejected as an artist and building up a little bit of that thicker skin to hearing no, I was thinking about that conversation between these two artists and how often they hear no. And while that's hard, they've had to get used to that as a part of their profession. That's a muscle you have to learn and then flex.
Yeah. And as I thought about it, and I'm in a totally different direction here, as our esteemed narrator was talking about this, like, I think about the art that I love isn't necessarily the art that I want to see. Like when I go to go to look at art, I find myself drawn to art that is intensely emotional. I'll walk up to a painting and I'll be like, oh, And if I walk up to a painting that's really well done but doesn't evoke any emotion, I kind of like, that's nice, it's pretty, and I walk away. And I find that some of that artwork that I just stare at a gallery or at a show or it's on, I don't necessarily want that in my house.
Yeah.
Because it might evoke a feeling that's incredibly powerful and I can feel the artist's pain or whatever. But I don't necessarily want to see that each day as I walk by. And I wouldn't necessarily want that in my shop. So there you go.
Well, thank you both so much for a riveting debate and a glimpse into the collective conscience of the internet forums. Remember, morality is often shades of gray and not just black or white.
Truth can be stranger than fiction, so stay true and stay strange.
And tune in again next week when we address another really interesting issue that our Michael will bring to us.
Please follow and share Veritas Views on any of the podcast platforms with your neighbors and friends. And as always, stick around through the credits for the bonus conversation about the seemingly random items in the therapist's office and the stories behind those objects.
You can follow Dr. Dan Kessler at Dr. Dan Kessler and Dr. Gayle MacBride at Dr. G. MacBride. Oh, and you can find them both at veritaspp.com. Credits. Tickling the Ivories, Matthew Reddington. Art, production, and design, bringing the show together with flair and finesse, Michelle Love. Recording and editing, turning chaos into something worth sharing, Michael MacBride. Intro, outro, I'm Kelly Buttrick, a VO talent who just happens to be Dr. MacBride's cousin. Cats, CJ, Linus, Sadie, and Griffin. Hosting by whomever lost the coin flip. Interruptions by all their children.
Oh my gosh. So we're going to talk about what's in someone's office?
Yes,
not in someone's office.
We do, and I apologize. I'm going to hijack this one because earlier we actually, Gayle and I talked about this, like what are we going to ask each other about the thing in our office, and I asked Gayle, ask me why there's a blank wall in my office, and I think we talked about this before in talking about the hammer in my office, but there's a blank wall that needs a painting in my office, and I moved into the office 15 years ago. And I thought, I need to find the perfect painting because this is hanging over my client's head and I'm going to see it every day. So I have a hammer in my desk drawer. And I think I talked about the hammer before. I've been staring at that blank wall and I thought, what emotion? What is this going to evoke? What do I want to look at each day? And 15 years later, I haven't figured out what I want to look at.
Okay, now I know which wall you're talking about. I was like,
right. So the wall is still blank.
At that wall. The one
wall is still yes. And if you've sat in my office and you sat in that chair, you don't see it. So it wouldn't be. Yeah. But I never could figure out what artwork I would want to have day in and day out. What thing I'd like to have because art is so evocative of emotion.
Interesting.
So,
now,
so the walls remain blank.
Said chair in the office layout. Do you know what's above that chair in my office?
Yep. What is above that chair in your office that you would most often see, and does that impact? So I'll turn it around.
I decided it immediately when I moved into the office because I think I had a sense of what I wanted in there, which is a sense of peace and calm. So it's actually a picture I took of some stacked stones, and I know stacked stones. But I didn't stack them. They were there. I'm terrible at that. But they were so beautiful. And it's a gray and kind of drizzly day on Lake Superior. My husband and I had taken a trip up there, I think for our 10th anniversary. And I saw the stack of stones with the water. And I remember just getting down real low with my camera and taking this photo. And it turned out great. I really liked it. And so I blew it up and I put it on that wall because for me, I love water and waves and movement is just so peaceful. And it's actually, it feels like a little bit of a window into time, but also a window into a place of peace. And so I love that photo. It's not the art in my office that gets the most comments.
Right.
It is the most personally meaningful.
That makes a lot of sense. And that I could totally, I'm imagining in that moment, like you're working with someone, they're struggling with something, like sometimes as we're working with folks, our own emotions rise, and our own emotions, and we have to govern that to some degree, be aware of it, use it, but also govern it to some degree. And I could totally see in that moment, like thinking, looking up, seeing that, and allowing that calm to kind of clarify your thinking. So I like your choice way better than my blank wall.
Well, I love the discussion, especially around creating a vibe and in Henry's art. So
Yeah.
good time. Thank you, Dr. Kessler.
Thank you so much, Dr. MacBride, for your wisdom.
Yeah.
All right.
And thank you all for tuning in. Tune in next week for another exciting Am I the Asshole debate.
We love hearing from you, so please review us on Apple, Spotify, or, well, wherever you're listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please review, like, and follow. Also, give it a share. This helps us reach more listeners.